The massive, towering walls of the arena loomed high above, casting long shadows over the blood-soaked sand. Spectators from countless worlds filled the stands, their cheers echoing through the air as the most dangerous gladiators prepared for combat. The atmosphere was electric, thick with anticipation. This was no ordinary fight. This was the Intergalactic Gladiator Championship, and the stakes were higher than ever. Callum Voss, a human unlike any other, stood in the center of the arena. His body was battered from countless battles, but his eyes burned with the fire of determination. His enemies, both alien and human, had learned to fear the human's relentless will to survive. Callum was not just a man. He was something more, a living legend among warriors. Across from him stood Queen Thytrax, the feared insectoid gladiator queen. Her exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights of the arena. With her massive claws and razor-sharp mandibles, she was a force of nature, known throughout the galaxy as the most vicious warrior alive. She had never lost a match, and she was confident that this human, no matter how strong, would be no different. The battle began with the sound of a blaring horn. Thytrax moved first, her legs clicking against the ground as she charged at Callum with terrifying speed. Her claws swiped through the air with such force that the wind itself seemed to scream. Callum didn't flinch. He had faced worse, and he knew this fight was just another step in proving humanity's strength. He darted to the side, narrowly avoiding her deadly strike. The crowd gasped, watching as the human moved with impossible agility. No one had ever seen a gladiator dodge an attack from Queen Thytrax, and yet Callum had done it without breaking a sweat. He grinned, his body already starting to feel the rush of adrenaline. Thytrax growled in frustration. She had never faced an opponent who moved with such fluidity, with such confidence. In her centuries of fighting, she had always been the fastest, the most powerful, but this human was different. She attacked again, more ferocious this time, aiming for his throat. Callum's eyes flicked to her movements, reading them with unnatural accuracy. His training had taken him far beyond mere human limits. With a swift twist, he grabbed her arm, using her momentum against her, and threw her off balance. The queen stumbled, crashing into the arena floor. The crowd went wild, their cheers deafening. Thytrax hissed in anger, quickly recovering and rising to her feet. Her mandibles clicked together in a low, menacing sound. "You are not like the others," she muttered, her voice laced with surprise. Callum didn't answer. He knew that in this fight, his actions spoke louder than any words could. With a sudden, explosive movement, Callum leaped toward her, his fist flying toward her head. Thytrax raised her claws to block, but Callum's speed was overwhelming. His strike landed, sending her reeling once again. For the first time, doubt flickered in the queen's many eyes. This human, he wasn't like the others. This human was something else. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Even the most seasoned warriors in the stands couldn't believe what they were witnessing. Callum Voss wasn't just fighting for victory. He was fighting to show the galaxy that humanity was a force that could not be underestimated. And in that moment, Queen Thytrax, the undefeated gladiator queen, realized something terrifying. She had never faced an opponent like this before, and she was beginning to wonder if she ever would again. The battle raged on, the air heavy with the sounds of struggle and fury. Queen Thytrax, once a symbol of fear, now found herself shaken by the human in front of her. Her usual confidence was slipping away, and for the first time in her life, she felt something strange: doubt. Callum moved with an eerie calmness. Every time she attacked, he dodged, blocked, or countered with ease. His movements were almost predictable, yet always surprising. He didn't just fight to win. He fought with a purpose, a quiet intensity that unnerved the mighty queen. Thytrax had fought across the galaxy, facing beasts and warriors that could tear planets apart. But this human, he was different. Thytrax's claws slashed through the air once more, aimed at Callum's throat, but he was already gone. slipping behind her with impossible speed. She twisted, her mandibles clicking in frustration. She was the queen of this arena, the embodiment of power, yet she was being toyed with by this human. A growl rumbled from her chest as she lunged again, her body a blur of deadly motion. Her claws cut through the air, aiming for Callum's midsection. This time, Callum didn't dodge. He stood his ground. As the queen's strike came, he stepped forward and caught her arm midair, twisting it with a sharp crack. Sitrax shrieked in pain, pulling back immediately, but her eyes locked onto him with a new fear. Her breath was quick and labored. She had never met anyone who could withstand her full strength, let alone turn it against her. This was not just any gladiator. This was a human, and in her long life, she had always thought of humans as weak, fragile creatures, easy to crush. But now, she began to wonder if that belief was all wrong. As she backed away, the crowd in the stands fell into stunned silence. They had never seen a gladiator queen retreat, especially not in the middle of a match. Kytrax's pride was in tatters. Her mandibles clicked nervously, the sound echoing across the arena. Callum didn't move. He simply stood there, watching her carefully, waiting for her next move. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed a burning intensity. He was human, yes, but he had learned, through wars and battles, to become far more than what anyone expected. He was not just fighting for himself. He was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy, and that gave him a strength no alien could understand. Sitrax took a step back, her mind racing. She needed to finish this fight. She couldn't lose. She had never lost. But something gnawed at her, a whisper deep in her mind. What if she couldn't defeat this human? What if he was the beginning of something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined? "You?" she began, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You are not like the others." Her eyes locked onto Callum's with a strange mixture of awe and fear. Callum said nothing. His posture was relaxed, but his readiness was clear. He didn't need to speak. He had already proven everything he needed to. The battle wasn't just about strength or skill. It was about humanity's spirit, the ability to adapt, to survive, and to overcome. Queen Sitrax's hands trembled slightly as she steadied herself, trying to regain her focus. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, she questioned whether she could win. And that, above all, was the most dangerous thing Callum could have done. Plant the seed of doubt in the mind of the galaxy's most feared warrior. In that moment, the arena was silent. The queen was no longer the predator. She was the prey. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she could escape. Sitrax stood in the center of the arena, her body heaving with effort. Her claws trembled, not from the weight of her massive frame, but from the shock of what had just happened. She had never felt fear like this before. The human, Callum Voss, had caught her off guard, not once, but twice. Each time, he had countered her strongest attacks with ease, as if he knew what she was going to do before she did it herself. It was something she had never experienced in all her battles, and it was slowly breaking her resolve. The crowd watched in stunned silence, their eyes wide, their breaths held. They had never seen their queen, the mighty gladiator who had torn through every opponent like a storm, back down from a fight. And yet, here she was, standing uncertain and vulnerable in front of a human. The arena, usually filled with cheers and roars of excitement, now echoed with the murmur of confusion. Callum, on the other hand, was calm. His chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, his eyes locked on Sitrax. He didn't rush, didn't push forward. He was waiting. He wasn't just fighting to win this match. He was fighting to prove a much bigger point, that humanity was not to be underestimated. Sitrax snapped out of her daze. She was the queen. She would not lose to a human. Her pride demanded she attack, to show this warrior that no matter how strong he was, she was the one in control. Without warning, she charged at Callum once again. Faster than before, her claws aimed at his throat. Callum's eyes narrowed. He could see the attack coming from a mile away. He didn't have to guess. He knew exactly where she would strike. Cytrax's speed was impressive, but it was no match for his precision. As she closed the distance, Callum sidestepped, his body moving like water. He barely made a sound as he shifted to the side, letting the queen's deadly claws slice through the empty air. But this time, Callum didn't just dodge. In a single fluid motion, he reached out, grabbing her wrist mid-swipe. His grip was firm, unyielding, like iron. Cytrax tried to pull back, but his hold was like a vice. With a quick twist, Callum spun her around, using her own momentum against her. The queen's massive body was flung forward, crashing into the ground with a deafening thud. The impact shook the arena. The crowd gasped, eyes wide in disbelief. Cytrax, the undefeated gladiator queen, was on the ground, her body vulnerable for the first time in her life. She struggled to rise, her claws scraping the sand as she pushed herself up. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, but her eyes were filled with fury, not defeat. This human had made a mistake. "You're different," she spat, her voice filled with a mix of rage and awe. "But you will pay for this." Callum stood over her, his stance unwavering. He wasn't smiling, but there was a certain calmness in his expression that made him seem unshakable. He didn't need to prove anything anymore. The fight had already been won. Cytrax had shown her hand, and now the galaxy could see that she wasn't invincible. The queen stood up, her legs shaking, but her pride refusing to break. "I will crush you," she hissed, baring her teeth. But Callum just tilted his head slightly, his eyes locked on hers. "We'll see." It wasn't arrogance. It was simply the truth. Humanity had faced the worst the universe could throw at them, and they had survived, adapted, and grown stronger with every battle. And now, the galaxy would learn that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how terrifying the foe, humanity could never be broken. Cytrax raised her claws again, but this time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her movements. For the first time in her life, she didn't know if she could win. And that thought terrified her. The arena was silent. Even the distant hum of the crowd seemed to have faded, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Queen Cytrax stood on shaky legs, her claws raised in defiance, but her once steady gaze now flickered with doubt. Her body was bruised and bloodied from the battle, her pride more wounded than any physical injury. Callum Voss, the human who had taken her down, stood calm and poised in front of her. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes never left hers. The way he had moved, effortlessly dodging and countering her every attack, had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. She had thought herself invincible, the supreme warrior of the galaxy, but this human had proven otherwise. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Cytrax's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, her sharp mandibles twitching in irritation. She had faced enemies far stronger than Callum, yet none had made her feel so vulnerable. She had seen fear in the eyes of her past opponents, but this human, he wasn't afraid. It was as if he saw something in her, something she couldn't understand. You're not like the others," Cytrax said at last, her voice low and unsure. There was a tremor in her tone, one she couldn't hide. Callum didn't respond right away. He didn't need to. His silence was his answer. He knew that the queen had finally seen it, the truth that had been hidden beneath the surface of every battle humanity had ever fought. He was a part of something bigger. Humanity's strength didn't come from physical power alone. It came from their refusal to be defeated, no matter the odds. Cytrax's mandibles clicked together, the sound sharp and irritated. "What are you?" she demanded, her voice rising with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You can't be human. No human could do what you've done." Callum took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm exactly what you think I am," he said calmly, his voice firm yet not unkind. "I'm human, and humanity has never been what you thought it was." Citrex snarled, her frustration bubbling over. No, you're something else. No species survives like this. Not after everything you've been through. I've seen your kind before. Weak, fragile. But you. She trailed off, her mind struggling to comprehend what was happening. Her pride burned as she finally had to admit it. She couldn't defeat him. No matter how strong she was, this human had already proven that humanity was something far greater than any of them had realized. Callum's gaze softened slightly. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a symbol. Humanity, through centuries of war, hardship, and survival, had become something resilient, something unstoppable. They had learned to adapt, to evolve, to survive the impossible. You were wrong about us, Callum said, his voice now quieter, but filled with strength. We are not weak. We may not be the biggest or the strongest, but when the galaxy throws its worst at us, we get back up, every single time. Citrax's claws trembled as she lowered them slightly, the weight of Callum's words sinking in. She had never considered humanity as more than an insignificant species, one that could be crushed easily. But now, after witnessing Callum's determination, she had no choice but to admit that she was wrong. The crowd, still silent, watched the exchange unfold, unsure of what to make of it. This was more than just a gladiator match. This was something bigger. The universe was starting to realize that the human spirit was not to be underestimated. Callum took another step closer to Citrax. He wasn't trying to provoke her. He was simply standing tall, his presence commanding respect. You were right about one thing, he said, his voice steady. You're not facing a human. You're facing humanity. The Queen's mandibles clicked once more, but this time, it wasn't in anger. It was a reluctant acknowledgement. She was beaten, and though she would never admit it out loud, she knew that she had just learned something the galaxy would never forget. Callum wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for humanity's place in the stars. And no one would ever forget the day the galaxy learned the truth about humans. You said. Callum stood tall, his eyes locked onto Citrax, whose claws were now lowered, her fierce posture no longer as threatening as before. The Queen's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. What she had just witnessed in the arena had shaken her to the core. She had expected to crush this human, to prove once again that her strength and skill were unmatched. But instead, she had been forced to confront something far more unsettling: the will of humanity. Citrax had fought many opponents over the centuries. Some had been strong, others fast, and a few had been nearly impossible to defeat. But none of them had made her feel the way this human did. It wasn't his strength that unnerved her. It was the way he fought, the way he never gave up. She had seen him face danger after danger, his body bruised, his spirit unbroken. It was as if every battle only made him stronger, as if the more the universe tried to defeat him, the more he thrived. And that was something no alien species had ever been able to understand. You still don't get it, do you? Callum's voice broke through her thoughts, his tone calm but filled with an undeniable power. You think humans are just weak creatures, born to be crushed. But what you don't realize is that we thrive under pressure. We don't break. We adapt. Citrax narrowed her eyes, trying to process his words. She had heard rumors of humans before, stories from other species about how they had survived the worst of the galaxy's wars and disasters. But those were just stories. To her, they had always seemed exaggerated, like myths told by cowards. Now, though, standing in the aftermath of their battle, she couldn't deny it any longer. There was something deeply different about humans. You talk about adapting, Citrax said slowly, her voice now softer, less certain. But how is that possible? How can you just keep getting stronger after every failure, after every loss? Callum looked at her, his expression unwavering. Because every time we fall, we learn. Every time we lose, we come back stronger. It's not just about fighting. It's about surviving. And no matter what the universe throws at us, we never stop surviving. Citrax took a step back, her mind spinning. She had heard of such resilience in other species, but they had been just that, stories. No one had ever truly believed that humans were capable of such an incredible power. And yet, here she was, standing in front of the proof. Callum's words were like a truth she hadn't wanted to face. Humans weren't just strong, they were relentless. Their will to survive, to endure, was something that no other species had ever truly understood. Even now, in the face of impossible odds, Callum stood before her, unbroken, a living testament to what humanity had become. "You think you've won," Cytrax murmured, almost to herself. "But there's more at stake than just this fight. You're fighting against an empire, against millions of us. You can't defeat us all." Callum didn't flinch. His eyes were steady, unwavering. "We don't have to defeat you all. We just have to survive. We'll find a way. Humans always do." The Queen's mandibles clicked as she turned away, her mind still racing. She had faced battles before, but this one felt different. For the first time, she realized that it wasn't just about winning the fight. It was about the spirit of the humans who fought. It was something she couldn't break, no matter how hard she tried. Something more powerful than her claws, her strength, or her rage. The truth was clear now. Humanity had a strength that no alien could match. It wasn't something that could be crushed with a single blow. It was something that could only grow, becoming stronger with each fight, each struggle. And for the first time, Cytrax understood that she wasn't just fighting a human. She was fighting an entire species, and that more than anything was what terrified her. The galaxy would never see humanity the same way again. Callum Voss had just proven that. The arena was still. The echoes of battle had long faded, but the tension in the air was thick. Callum Voss stood in the center of the bloodied sand, his chest heaving slightly from the exertion. He had faced the Queen, and he had won. But something in his gut told him that the fight was far from over. What had just happened between him and Cytrax wasn't just about one battle. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The galaxy was watching, and soon they would understand just what humanity was capable of. Cytrax had retreated to the far end of the arena, her mind still reeling from the events of the fight. Callum had proven her wrong in ways she hadn't even thought possible. For the first time, she questioned everything she had ever known about humans. They weren't weak. They weren't fragile. And they were not to be underestimated. The galaxy, and especially her people, had underestimated humanity for far too long. But there was more at stake than her own pride. Cytrax knew that this fight had caught the attention of the galaxy's leaders. The powerful empires, the warriors, and the rulers of distant worlds were all watching. They would soon come to realize that humanity wasn't just another species to be crushed. They were a force to be reckoned with, and that thought scared her more than anything. Cytrax's thoughts were interrupted by the loudspeaker crackling to life, the voice of the arena announcer booming over the crowd. "The battle is over. Queen Cytrax has been defeated. Victory goes to Callum Voss, champion of humanity." The words echoed throughout the arena, and for a moment, the entire stadium was silent. Then the crowd erupted into a deafening roar. The humans in the stands cheered, their voices rising above the rest. They had never seen a human gladiator defeat such a powerful foe. But as the cheers grew louder, a new feeling began to stir in the hearts of the spectators. It wasn't just pride. It was something more, hope. As the Queen's defeat spread throughout the galaxy, news traveled faster than light. The message was clear. A human had faced one of the strongest warriors the galaxy had ever known, and won. The impossible had happened. And now, the galaxy was watching humanity. Callum Voss felt the weight of it all. The cheers from his people were deafening, but beneath it all, he knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do in a fight, but they had no idea what was coming next. It was not just about surviving anymore. It was about making a stand. It was about showing that humanity had a place in the stars. He could feel the eyes of the galaxy on him, But he knew he couldn't do it alone. There were others out there, like him, who had the same fire in their hearts. They had all been pushed to the edge, but now they were ready to rise up, to fight back, to show the universe what humanity was capable of. As Callum walked off the arena floor, the weight of the moment settled over him. Cytrax's defeat was just the spark. The real battle was about to begin. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The galaxy was vast, and many would still see humanity as weak, as small. But they were wrong. Callum was no longer just a gladiator. He was the symbol of something much bigger, a revolution. The time had come for humanity to rise and claim its place among the stars. And there was no turning back now. The whisper of revolution had begun. The galaxy would never be the same again. The victory in the arena had rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave. News of Callum Voss's victory over Queen Cytrax spread far and wide, sparking whispers of revolution among the oppressed species, while striking fear into the hearts of the galaxy's ruling powers. Humanity had proven itself stronger than anyone had imagined, and this revelation was not something the powerful empires would allow to go unchallenged. In the quiet of his quarters, Callum sat by a small window, looking out over the city. The streets below were alive with celebration, but his mind was far away. He had won the battle, but the war was just beginning. Cytrax might have fallen, but many more threats loomed on the horizon. There were factions in the galaxy that would not sit idly by while humanity grew stronger. They would come after him, and they would come after his people. A soft knock at the door broke his thoughts. Callum turned, and the door opened to reveal one of the human officers, a young woman named Lieutenant Aria. Her face was serious, her eyes filled with concern. "Sir," she said, stepping inside, "we need to talk." Callum nodded and motioned for her to sit. Aria was one of the few who had been with him since the beginning, since the first moments of resistance against the alien forces. She had seen the struggles, the defeats, and the victories. If anyone understood what was at stake, it was her. "What's on your mind, Lieutenant?" Callum asked. Aria's eyes flickered to the window, then back to him. "There are reports coming in. The empires of the galaxy. They're moving. They're afraid, Callum. Afraid of humanity's rise. And they won't let this go unpunished." Callum's gaze darkened. He had known this was coming. The victory over Cytrax was only the first blow, and it had shaken the foundations of the galaxy. But it was also a challenge to the powers that ruled with an iron fist. The empires would come together, determined to crush this new threat before it could grow. Humanity had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with, but that was a threat many would not tolerate. "We've made a mark," Callum said quietly. "But now, we're in their sights, and they won't stop until they crush us." Aria nodded. "There are reports of military movements, ships being prepared, armies gathering. The other empires are forming alliances, and they're coming for us. They won't let a species like humanity gain power." Callum stood up, his fists clenching at his sides. The fight was no longer just about winning battles in the arena. It was about survival on a scale much larger than he had ever imagined. The empires would stop at nothing to ensure humanity never rose to power. They would crush them before they had a chance to grow. "We need to prepare," Callum said, his voice firm. "We can't let them take us down. We've only just started." "But how?" Aria asked, her voice filled with worry. "We don't have the resources, the armies, or the weapons to take on the entire galaxy." Callum paused, looking out the window once more. He could feel the weight of the moment settling in. The victory in the arena was just a glimpse of what humanity could become. But without preparation, without allies, they stood no chance against the might of the galactic empires. "We'll find a way," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We'll unite the other oppressed species. We'll find those who want to rise with us. Together, we can fight back." Aria looked at him, her eyes filled with hope, but also a sense of fear. The road ahead would not be easy. They would face enemies far more powerful than Cytrax. But Callum's resolve was unshakable. He had seen humanity fight against the impossible before, and he knew they could do it again. As he looked back at Area, Callum knew one thing for certain. The fight was far from over, and humanity would not go down without a fight. The galaxy was waking up to a new reality. Humanity, once thought weak and insignificant, had proven its strength. The victory of Callum Voss over Queen Kytrax had sent ripples through the Empire. Now, a new war was brewing, and the empires were united in one goal: to destroy the human threat before it could grow. But Callum knew something they didn't. They weren't alone. In the shadows of the galaxy, there were others who had also suffered under the rule of the empires. Oppressed species, once considered weak, were now looking for a leader. They had watched humanity's rise with hope, and many of them were ready to stand alongside them. Callum gathered his closest allies: Lieutenant Area, Captain Jorik from the Veldar race, and a few others who had proven their loyalty. The meeting took place in a hidden room, deep in the heart of their base. The walls were thick with silence, and the air was heavy with the weight of their situation. "Callum, the situation is growing worse," Captain Jorik said, his voice deep and rough, like it always was. The Veldar were a proud warrior race, their bodies built for strength. The empires are closing in. If we don't act soon, we'll be crushed. Callum nodded, his eyes focused on the map projected in front of them. It showed the movements of the enemy fleets, the hidden military bases, and the alliances forming in the galaxy. The enemy's grip was tightening around them, but there were cracks, small but important cracks. Humanity's victory had ignited something in the hearts of the oppressed. "We won't face them head-on just yet," Callum said, his voice calm but determined. "We're not ready for an all-out war, but we can strike where they least expect it." Lieutenant Area stepped forward, her expression sharp. "We have the element of surprise. The empires think humanity is still weak. They don't know that we've already begun to unite the other species." Callum looked at her, a hint of pride in his eyes. Area had been working tirelessly to find those willing to join their cause, and now she was bringing in reports of several species, some small, others powerful, ready to fight. The Empire would never see it coming. "We'll start with the planets they think are nothing," Callum said. "We'll hit them fast, hit them hard, create confusion, disrupt their supply lines. Every victory we win will send a message that humanity is no longer afraid to fight back." Jorik grinned, showing his sharp teeth. "I like it. We'll show them that they can't just walk over us. We'll hit them where it hurts." The room fell silent as the plan began to take shape. They would build a network of resistance cells, hidden within the shadows of the galaxy. Small raids, targeted strikes. Nothing too big, nothing that would draw too much attention, at least not at first. But every move they made would be a step closer to toppling the Empire's reign. Callum stood up, his heart heavy but his mind focused. He knew the path ahead would be dangerous. There would be losses, and there would be sacrifices, but this was their only chance. The galaxy was on the brink of war, and if they didn't act soon, the empires would crush them all. "We fight for survival," Callum said, his voice low but filled with fire. "We fight for freedom, and we fight for humanity's future. They think we're weak. They think we're just a passing moment, but we're not. We're more than that. And soon, the galaxy will know it." As he spoke, the faces around him hardened with resolve. The galaxy might be vast, but the fire of resistance had been lit. Humanity had made its mark, and now it was time to ignite a rebellion that would shake the very foundations of the universe. The first steps had been taken. Now, all they needed was the courage to see it through. The revolution was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. The quiet of the night was broken by the hum of the engines. In the heart of the galaxy, a small fleet of ships moved in the shadows, their sleek designs blending into the blackness of space. Callum Voss stood on the bridge of the lead ship, his eyes fixed on the stars ahead. The time for small strikes was over. The first phase of their plan had worked. Now, it was time to take the fight to the heart of the Empire. Lieutenant Area, Captain Jorek, and the rest of the crew were at their stations, their faces a mix of determination and nerves. The galaxy was vast, and the empires that ruled it were powerful. But humanity had already proven that they were not to be underestimated. "Ready for the jump, sir," Area said, her voice calm but filled with tension. "All ships are in position." Callum took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. The fleet was small, but it was made up of humans and their new allies. The planets they had targeted were critical supply points for the Empire, weak spots that, if hit hard enough, could slow their advance. The plan was simple: hit fast, disrupt the Empire's resources, and vanish before they could retaliate. "Jump in 5, Callum said, his voice steady. The countdown began, and the crew worked in perfect sync. The lights on the ship dimmed as the engines powered up, ready to make the jump into enemy territory. Callum's eyes flickered to the view screen, where the stars stretched and bent, becoming streaks of light as they jumped into hyperspace. In a flash, they were there, right in the heart of enemy space. The ships dropped out of hyperspace in the shadow of a large, heavily guarded station. It was a key point in the Empire's network, a hub that supplied weapons and resources to their fleets. If they could destroy it, they would cripple the Empire's supply lines for months. "Target acquired," Captain Jorek growled from his station. "Weapons at the ready." Callum's pulse quickened as he watched the station grow larger on the screen. The odds were against them. The station was well guarded, and any wrong move could send the entire fleet into a trap. But there was no turning back now. Humanity had to show that they weren't afraid to strike. "Launch all fighters," Callum commanded. The ship's hangars opened, releasing a wave of sleek fighters into the void. The small fleet moved with precision, dodging enemy patrols and approaching the station with incredible speed. Callum could feel the tension building, the final moments before they would engage in the most dangerous part of their mission. "Firing range in 10 seconds, Area said, her voice cool but intense. "Hold steady," Callum ordered, his hand clenched on the console. His mind raced, but his body remained still. This was it, the moment that would define everything. The fleet closed in, the station now just a few kilometers away. Callum could see the glowing defense turrets powering up, ready to fire. It was a game of seconds. If they didn't strike first, the station's weapons would tear their fleet apart. "Now," Callum shouted. In an instant, the fleet unleashed a barrage of laser fire, hitting the station's weak points with precision. Explosions rocked the station, and the enemy ships surrounding it scrambled to respond. But the human fleet was fast, and their allies were skilled. They hit hard and fast, dodging enemy fire and turning the tide in their favor. As the station began to fall apart, Callum felt a rush of triumph. The strike had been successful. They had crippled a key point in the Empire's supply chain. It wasn't a victory that would win the war, but it was a statement. Humanity wasn't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back, and they were winning. But as the station exploded in the distance, Callum's heart remained heavy. This was just the beginning. The Empire would retaliate, and they would face even greater challenges ahead. But for the first time, humanity had shown the galaxy that they could make a difference. The spark had ignited, and there was no turning back. The victory was small, but it sent a message that echoed across the galaxy. The Empire's fortress station was nothing more than space debris now, its key supply lines cut off. Humanity and its allies had struck where the enemy least expected, and the news of the attack spread like wildfire. Callum Voss stood at the helm of the flagship, watching the results unfold on the screen. A part of him felt satisfaction, but there was also a growing sense of urgency. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Lieutenant Area approached him, her face serious but filled with quiet pride. "We've crippled their supply chains, sir. The message is clear. The Empires will have to rethink their strategy." Callum nodded but didn't smile. It's a start. But the empires won't just sit back and let us keep hitting them like this. They'll retaliate. We have to be ready for their response. She didn't argue. She knew he was right. The galaxy's ruling powers were vast, their fleets enormous. This was just one small victory in a larger war, and it was only a matter of time before the full weight of the empire would come crashing down on them. They had made their mark, but now they had to make it count. "Commander Voss, we've received a transmission," came the voice of an officer from the communication station. "It's from one of our new allies. They have information on the Empire's next move." Callum turned toward the officer. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and a new face appeared. An alien with dark green skin and sharp angular features. He was from the Arcanian race, a species once enslaved by the Empire, now rallying to the cause of humanity's revolution. His name was Threx, and he spoke with a sense of urgency. "The Empires are regrouping," Threx said, his voice low. "But they're not just preparing for another battle. They're planning something more dangerous. They're going to try to crush you by targeting your homeworld, Earth." Callum's heart skipped a beat. "Earth," he repeated. "But that's where it all began. Why target Earth?" Threx's face darkened. "The Empires know that Earth is the birthplace of humanity, the place where your strength began. If they destroy Earth, they believe they can destroy the heart of your people. They'll take away your hope, your spirit, and your drive." Callum clenched his fists. The thought of Earth, his home, the birthplace of humanity, being destroyed was unthinkable. But he could feel the weight of the threat in his chest. If the Empires truly believed that taking Earth would break humanity's will, they would stop at nothing to achieve it. "We won't let them do it," Callum said firmly, his voice filled with resolve. "We'll fight for Earth. We'll defend it with everything we have." Arya stepped forward, her eyes locked on Callum's. "We've come this far. We've made our mark. We're not stopping now." Callum looked around at the faces of his crew, the faces of his allies, the people who had fought beside him, who had believed in the dream of a free galaxy. They were ready. They would defend Earth, and they would show the galaxy that humanity was not just a force to be reckoned with. It was a force that would never back down. "Prepare the fleet," Callum ordered. "We're going to take the fight to them. If they want Earth, they'll have to come through us." The crew nodded in unison, a fire burning in their eyes. The war was about to escalate. The Empires had made their move, but humanity was ready. They would fight for their home, for their future, and for their place in the stars. The tide was turning, and the galaxy would soon learn that humanity wasn't just a species to be feared. They were the ones who would change everything. The revolution had begun, and it was unstoppable.